Okay, good. Welcome, Marianne, and
Thank
welcome
you.
everybody. Today is May 25th, 2021. That's when we are having this chat. And I am Tijen Genco, Master Certified Coach and Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. We are going to have a dialogue with Marianne about one of my courses around NLP and Polyvagal Theory. And Marianne Gernetzke is one of my students, and she's a well-established coach and OT as well. I would like to welcome her, and I want to also ask Marianne, what would you like to for our audience to know about you and your coaching business?
Sure. Well, I can share that I come to coaching from over 20 years in a holistic healthcare field, and I'm national board certified as a health and wellness coach and also ADAPT certified as a functional health coach. I offer coaching to individuals who would like to work on overcoming negative thinking so that they can reauthor their story and achieve greater well-being.
Beautiful. And you are also waiting to hear from ICF soon to become.
That's correct.
Exactly. Okay, good. So we can get started if you like.
Mhm. All right, sounds good. Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to interview you today. And we're going to be talking about your upcoming course, the Genco Method, Polyvagal Theory, and NLP Applications to Coaching. And I'm excited to talk about this. There's a lot of rich learning opportunity coming up in this course. What I'd like to suggest is perhaps we can talk first about the logistics of the course and the structure of the course, and
Mhm.
then get a little bit more deeply into what polyvagal theory and neuro-linguistic programming are and how they inform you about your coaching method. How does that sound?
That sounds beautiful. Thank you, Marianne.
Okay, great. So just to open this up, who might benefit from taking this course?
That's a lovely question. Thank you for that. I haven't mentioned in the intro that basically the viewers who are interested in knowing more of my background, they can find more information about my bio in my website under About Me section. But I have been a coach pretty much in every part of the coaching verticals as an executive coach, internal coach, external coach, life coach, health and well-being coach. So, and I am also continuing education provider both for the International Coach Federation as well as National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coaches. So, with that said, I believe that pretty much every coach can benefit from this training, especially those of the ones that wanting to get to the deeper levels into the client conversations. So really, I think this course will resonate more with the coaches who are wanting to do more into transformational coaching
Mhm.
than the transactional coaching. And those of the viewers may not be familiar with the terminology. Transactional coaching often stays at the superficial level and more action oriented response to whatever that comes to the coaching conversation. Transformational coaching, there is often deepening levels of awareness in the client, and therefore they transform their response to whatever they brought into the session. They transform themselves, come up with a new levels of awakening, and that takes them into new levels of being. And recently I started to also qualify or express my coaching as transcendental coaching, which even gets to the deeper levels of transcendence and new and deeper levels of awakening. So any coach that who wants to get to that level of engagement, either for themselves, obviously, or for the client, can benefit.
Wonderful. That just sounds amazing. So coaches that are interested in being transformational or even transcendental may really find this course an exciting one to take. You mentioned that you are an approved provider for both the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches and the International Coaching Federation. Can you speak to how many continuing education credits an individual can get from taking this course?
Yes, thank you again for that question. So, for the ICF, International Coach Federation, they have quite a restrictive and more focused in a way that assignment for the continuing core competency education credits. And therefore, they have to be towards the competencies practiced in a session. And therefore, this course, maybe I'll just step back for a second, is I structured the course as 4 modules of theory and discussions for neurolinguistic programming NLP, and 4 modules of Polyvagal theory and its applications. And of course, in both of those, it's a total of 8 modules. I will be teaching Genco method, how I apply those into the coaching. So there will be 8 hours of theory and how I teach this into both areas. And then each of those areas are supplemented with 4 1.5 hour mentor coaching sessions. And therefore, then when we are talking about ICF, then we are talking about total of that 22 hours of credit, core competency credit, can be applied for ICF, whether coaches wants to use that to upgrade their credentials, or they just need to submit to renew credentials, that will be applicable. For NBC-HWC, there are further credits. I'm sorry, for ICF, there will be 16 core competency credits. And for NBC-HWC, the theories are included. And therefore, there are going to be 22 CEUs included in the training. Since I talked about the structure of the course a little bit, I know you will ask me, but maybe I should continue to mention that there is also practicum part of this training that will be part of the training. There will be case study development and the presentation. So that is also my observations about that will be part of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for all of that. So I can try to summarize what you were sharing in a different way.
Yeah.
So the course is going to be a total of 9 weeks long.
Yes.
And for the first 8 weeks, each week there will be one 60-minute lecture and one 90-minute mentor coaching session. And then in the 9th week, there will be one 2-hour session where students will be presenting their case studies to each other based on their experiences working with a practice client throughout the course.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Welcome. You're welcome. And there's another component of the course that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is there's also homework. Yes. Each week, an opportunity for students to do personal study. And can you share a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, yes. So the homework assignments I often include pretty much in every teaching that I do, because that speaks to the self-growth of the coaching self awakening and self-awareness of the coaches more than just them learning about the theory. In that case, they are bringing themselves to a new level of awareness within the context of what we are learning. So the homework assignments, as well as a virtual classroom that the students continue to interact with me outside of the direct course contact hours, as well as with each other, is supportive of that. So there is often that every week there is a homework assignment that I ask, so they also sort of offline being coached by the master coach with my reflective coaching questions, that the students reflect on the agenda at hand and how is that applied to them as well as their clients, and how they are relevant to the core competencies of both of the organizations. And that also, then there is the client sessions, that part of the practicum. Coaches also work with the just to develop case studies offline with their clients, and to develop the case studies, but that helps them also integrate the learning throughout the course, that without waiting to finish the course and get into the practice part of it.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of wonderful opportunity for us to gain new experiences as coaches in participating in your course. And I know that experiential learning is very important to you as a teacher. Is there anything you'd like to add, to share with the viewers of this interview?
Yeah, thank you. So um, I design my courses to really speak to every kind of learner, that some people are audio learners, some people are visual, some people are kinesthetic. So I do everything I can to incorporate different modalities, so that if one modality is not speaking to them, they can find something else that works, and also still enhance their learning skills just doing something else that doesn't resonate with them so much. So, and I wonder that as a avid learner, that and you've been with me for a while, if there is anything you want to share with the viewers from your own learning experience.
Sure. Well, as you were sharing that, I I think in your teaching, it's not just about teaching from different points of view or different sensory systems, but I think one of your gifts as a teacher is you're really good at noticing what each of our gifts are and giving us opportunities to really highlight our gifts when we're working together in mentor coaching sessions. And sometimes that's new information for me. As an example, if you point out, Marianne knows something about this. And so, yeah, the experiential aspect of your courses is really supportive of my growth as a coach.
Wonderful to hear that. Thank you so much. Yeah. It's also important to me in a way that I don't want to, as a coach teacher, I want to really put the students, the client, to the highlight, even for the learning sessions. So there is me, but I am there as the supportive guide for the coach students, their own learning discovery in their own methods. So when I really create these courses, I am thinking almost in a way, this is like a PhD study, that there is the way of, yes, I am there as a guide sharing best practices that I have developed over the years. And then I'm also offering the other ways of integrating knowledge, so that the students can also research themselves through the homework, through the case study, through other things, share with the class, as well as grow and understand how this is applicable to their own coaching practice throughout the course. so that they are well equipped to function right after course is finished.
Mm-hmm. As we're discussing this seems like a good point where we might want to share about what your mentor coaching sessions are like for the new learner that's not familiar.
Hmm.
Um, how would you like to discuss that?
I'm wondering if you are willing to talk about it.
Sure. Yes, I was guessing that might be appropriate. So I can share that when we're in a mentor coaching session, we usually begin with about 30 minutes of discussion of the homework and the learning that each of us have gained from that experience. And we also talk within that conversation about how to apply that learning as coaches. And then after that, usually there's an invitation for one of us to become the client for the mentor coaching session. And then we'll engage in approximately 45 minutes of coaching where each of us takes turns offering an inquiry for that client. And then we end the session with about 10 or 15 minutes of discussion about what we've observed and what we've learned from that time together. It's usually a very rich experience being in any of your mentor coaching sessions.
Hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. And I wonder, Marianne, I know that you have taken a lot of training and very theoretical learner yourself. If there is some benefits that you can highlight that suited or spoke teaching style spoke to you more, what would you like to our audience to know about those?
Boy, I think you've already mentioned some of these aspects of your experiential teaching methods.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm not just learning about coaching, but I'm also learning very deeply about myself when I'm participating in mentor coaching and the homework as well. And I love that because I'm always discovering new aspects of me that helps me to not just be that transformational coach for my clients, but also experience firsthand the power of coaching in my own life.
Mhm.
Um, it and I can't imagine trying to learn about coaching without also engaging in that process because it is so rich and it just opens up so many new areas of understanding for me as a coach when I'm working with clients.
Beautiful. Thank you for that share.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're talking about so many wonderful aspects of this course, all of the pieces that you've pulled together. I'm thinking that somebody who's new to learning from you might feel a little bit overwhelmed with all of the things that will be happening during that 9-week time period. So I wanted to ask a little bit about flexibility in the course. For example, if somebody has a family vacation planned during the 8 weeks or other events that might conflict, what might be their ability to still participate in the course with those conflicts?
Absolutely. I am probably one of the most flexible teachers out there. Each session is recorded, and therefore everything is in the virtual classroom, so that the students cannot take the courses with us on live. They can follow through offline. And of course, if that's the case, there are some CEU restrictions I need to mention that we need to follow that. But that is possible. And I even often give flexibility to submit some of the missed homeworks after the class is ended. And absolutely that sometimes that people actually take my courses more than once.
Mhm.
So that, for example, one of the students that taking the somatic course the second time missed all of the mentor sessions the first time. now that person is participating and learning, and but that person was able to watch them offline. So yeah, there is absolutely flexibility. And like I said, I treat the students as the clients. I meet them where they are, and they take the course, um, and really as much as they want to take it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mhm.
I want to also ask, how often are you planning to offer this course?
Yeah, this is the first time this year. It's gonna start late June, the first time I'm offering. And I also have another 6.5 weeks offering somatic course. So they take quite a bit of time and resources from my end. And so my intent is to offer this course once a year,
Hmm.
but that may change. And as you know, that my intention now to really develop the people with that are been with me for a while, and more of my students like you are taking the course and going through the teaching assistant experience, or the train the trainer part of the courses. So as I develop further resources, then I can offer more frequently. But right now, at least for a few years, that's what I'm planning on doing. Thank you for that question too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I'm wondering, what benefits would a coach expect to get from taking this course? We've touched on many of them already in our conversation, but as we're starting to prepare now to talk about polyvagal theory and neuro-linguistic program, what are some of the things that a coach can expect to learn?
Yeah, I think I want to really summarize in simplistic ways that if we think about neurolinguistic programming, that's often creates a lot of self-awareness about what gets one's in the way of one's ability to change behaviorally. When we are talking about Polyvagal theory and its application, at least in the Genco method that I am doing, it's going to create more self-awareness about what gets in the way for somebody's ability to change biologically and physiologically. So together they create a more cohesive approach and self-awareness for the long lingering things, or the things that are not easily accessible to one's self-awareness, so that one can create change in a way that I'm thinking a while back, that when Prochaska created theoretical change model, he went through all of the theories, created the change model. I think I'm creating another revolutionary change method across the evidence-based methods and Eastern esoteric teachings, across multiple approaches into the theory and coaching applications into this, so that coaches become really well equipped to coach somebody holistically, including themselves. So that might be the benefits, some
Hmm.
of the benefits I am thinking about. Yeah.
Right. Um, so in learning to have greater self-awareness of what gets in the way of change, both behaviorally and at that biological level, we as coaches can learn to better understand the client, listen more deeply, um, understand the client's map of the world
Mhm.
more accurately, um, understand what helps create safety for the client, and all of these things can impact our coaching.
Absolutely. Thank you for getting into the details.
Yes.
Anything else you would like to mention?
Well, I think now if it's okay, we can transition into talking more specifically about polyvagal theory and NLP, and we'll probably get into more details in that
Okay, good.
conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing that I notice as we're talking about polyvagal theory and NLP is we're really talking about our understanding of the client's nervous system, because both of those theories inform us about that.
Yes.
And um, one of the comments that you've made that I've heard you say is that this course will help us learn to respond to the client or understand the client when they're stuck in a reactive response.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about that challenge of being stuck in a reactive response.
Absolutely. So if, for example, this gets into, people talk about that as an emotional intelligence, for example. When somebody learns to relate to life from a position of being defensive, or they have this. Now, one thing we didn't mention about what this course will also include is to cognitive distortive behavior, social upbringing, how those particular socialization process affects our response to life in general, because we learn life from people who care for us or who carried us, whether it's our biological mother or surrogate mother, and so on. There's so many layers in our programming. So let's say that when mother was pregnant and saw a dog and got scared, then the baby can be scared every time they see a dog or somebody talks about a dog or something like that, and they don't have a particular remembered trauma about it, but it is in there. So how do you change that? If you think about, there's a talk therapy, hypnotherapy, other things that they try to bypass and put a band-aid on clients' response. In the neuro-linguistic programming and the polyvagal applications, what we do is to figure out what happens to the client when we talk about the dog. Where is the visceral response and what happens to the behavioral response? Then really we are not coaching the outward response, but we are almost debugging the system where in the code the error is occurring. So we go to the source of the issue and asking questions about, as you heard me say in the mentor sessions, coaching in the blueprint, in the model of the client's world, so that we are figuring out from that point of view so that we can create deeply sustainable changes. So I had an executive coaching client. He will go to each corporate meetings, and he would, his chairperson thought that he was aggressive. But when I coached him in the sessions, I found out he had deeply fears about not being heard. If unless he's aggressive, he didn't learn that he can speak softly, that he can then still be respected and heard. So instead of giving him, for example, other tools about stopping and starting and forcing to change, we went into this understanding. From that understanding, we can change the program, as you mentioned, change the client's story. So then client actually understand, okay, when this fear is rising, where is it? Oh, it's in my liver. Okay, what do I need to do to shift into the new programming and so on? So I'm wondering how helpful these examples were.
Well, I'm finding this discussion to be very rich. So would it be okay if I share a
Yes,
perspective on what you're sharing?
yes.
So I'm a big fan of, because I have a background in trauma treatment, I'm a big fan of bottom up approaches versus top down approaches. And what I mean by that is using the example of the little boy who's afraid of dogs, but doesn't necessarily remember that initial trauma or have words to go with that initial trauma. Talk therapy, working from the top down, doesn't necessarily get to that trauma.
Mhm.
But what you're talking about is starting at the source of the trauma, looking at where it is in the body, viscerally, or how it's affecting their autonomic nervous system,
Mhm.
and really starting our work there. So, in a sense, from my point of view, you're talking about bottom up coaching, which I think is very exciting and not something that you experience in many coaching opportunities.
Mhm. Beautiful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So this seems like a perfect time to start talking about what polyvagal theory tells us about our very human response to stress.
Mhm.
Um, let's see, where would you like to begin in discussing polyvagal theory's impact?
Yeah, I wonder if you like to share what you know already, and then I can talk more about how that gets to be in the Genco method expressed.
Sure. Well, polyvagal theory is based on the work of Stephen Porges, and it informs us about how our nervous system has evolved to respond to stress. And often in this context, we're talking about our autonomic nervous system, which has two branches: our parasympathetic system, which helps us with calming, digestion, healing, rest, as well as social connection
Mhm.
with others. And then we have our sympathetic nervous system, which is involved in that fight or flight response when stress becomes overwhelming. That's what speeds up our heart rate and our breathing and causes us to feel very differently when we're under stress.
Mhm.
So in polyvagal theory, we focus a lot on how we can strengthen the functioning of the parasympathetic system. And we look specifically at the connection between our central nervous system and the rest of our body through the 10th cranial nerve, our vagus nerve, which travels from our brain through our neck and then to many of our major organs.
Mhm.
So how's that for our beginning point in talking about polyvagal?
Beautiful. A good way to make it digestible, Marianne.
Okay.
And within that, what I am going to, how I'm going to approach this in the Genko method, as well as a coaching approach, that I'm finding as well as a meditation and a yoga teacher, right? The Our Western scientific systems are good in qualifying, quantifying things. This is how we make them evidence based as we research. At the same time, there is a shortcoming of that approach that comes with a judgment, like fight and flight and disconnect and so on, that it really then dismisses, almost creates, as we relate to the client, we're already putting them in a state that's supposed to be undesirable, that dismisses the inherent function by divine design. So, in the way I will teach this is to really get into the curiosity of coaching. Yeah, I have this like wanting to be aggressive in my response, fight and flight.
Mhm.
Okay, what is the purpose of that? And when you choose that response or your body chooses that, what creates that for you outwardly? And if is that the desired choice? If not, what is the desired choice? And then what needs to change for you? So that will be more of that, how we apply that, creating even traveling through the nervous system, which part of the nerve, and some clients may not have the exact scientific language, doesn't matter. This is why that, okay, where is my heart center? Okay, that's fine, wherever it is. And as you mentioned, Stephen Forges was really looking to create safety for the clients and really understanding how safety is produced. And safety is important, one of the major survival need of every one of us. And the way I look at that through the lenses of polyvagal application is that when we feel safe, we get to be able to express our full potential as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that our ability to, or our choice to reach that full potential is still resides within us. But sometimes it's being taken away from us with these unconscious programming that we carry, whether it's inherited pattern or as a result of a trauma that we experience. So basically, as a coach, when we're having these dialogues, then clients can have a more appropriate choice in the matter, not necessarily disqualifying the state of fight and flight and this disconnection or connection, but okay, my body wanting to choose more aggressive expression right now, maybe that's not more appropriate for this thing. What do I want to choose now? So the choice becomes more available. And in a way that this is an advanced meditation technique to any human being to create more aware responses, bodily responses to the environment. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, in reflecting on all of this, I want to point out that what you're talking about goes far beyond polyvagal theory.
Mhm.
Because polyvagal theory is very Western, so it's based on evidence-based measurable systems. I've seen it even used by cell biologists in describing cell behavior.
Mhm.
But what you're talking about goes beyond that to more of that transcendental
Yeah.
place that you referenced earlier, talking about the meaning of the trauma and the client's access to their choices in life as they can try to move towards full potential. And so I'm recognizing in here too that you're bringing in a lot of your point of view from Eastern
Yes.
practices as well to not just access the measurable aspect of us as humans in looking at safety, but also looking at the energetic aspect of us and the spiritual aspect of us as it connects to safety.
Yes, thank you for that summary. Beautiful. And because, in a way that, like we both discussed, Western approach is good qualifying, quantifying things, but Eastern approach is also good unqualifying things because we are very unique beings. Not every one of us have to respond the same thing the same way. So each unique understanding and appreciation about each person's response to the life is the key so that they can empower themselves through these experiences. And you're right that I take evidence-based methods, and that's when I Genco methodized them. So it kind of gives a language, really, that Stephen Forges, I think, did research in yoga and meditative and breath practices and embedded them into his system, looking through the scientific eyes. But really, our appreciation of uniqueness and beauty in each human being, if you put that up front, and then we can take any of the evidence base and express it that way, might be more helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
as we discuss all this, it seems even more clear how this class will really help a coach to listen more deeply and truly understand at deeper levels what's going on with their client. And one thing that I love about this is I feel like it really makes coaching more trauma informed.
Mhm.
Um, which is something that's really important to me. Trauma informed care is something that many professions are growing in awareness of, but again, it's not something that I've heard discussed often in the context of coaching.
Yeah. And the thing is that, thank you for that, Marianne. Trauma can be anything, and we cannot necessarily understand. Like somebody can break a nail, that could be a traumatic experience for that person, and another person can be going through a physical abuse and might be much more resilient. We don't know, so therefore we need the trauma information in every session, that whether you're a coach or therapist. Yeah.
Hmm. And I feel like it's really important to our ethical practice as coaches as well to be trauma informed, because when people have traumas, it becomes so embedded in their story. It feels like part of their identity.
Mhm.
And if we're not understanding that trauma, they may feel like we're not accepting the whole person into our coaching sessions, and they may feel dismissed or shamed. And that's certainly not something that I want to do as a coach in any way.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I am, as a mentor coach, I am being asked a lot about the distinctions between the therapy and the coaching. I think we can talk about that a little bit here. That for the viewers, we're not talking about really getting into the therapy zone, but we're talking about client's relationship to the trauma. So that when we're talking about that relationship, which I will be getting more into how to do such inquiries in the NLP part of the course, Genco method of reconstructive inquiry, their relationship to the trauma is a safer way to create awareness around it instead of asking them how they feel about that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else you'd like to add there, Marianne?
I think that's a really important point, that we're not talking about therapy here in any way. One of the things that I think is a key uh, difference between coaching and therapy is that the therapist is acting in the expert role, which often is not collaborative and is very directive. And we as coaches can be aware of trauma without entering into that therapy space. We still want to be very collaborative with the client and partner with the client and let them be the expert on their lives.
Yes, thank you. And that's where also people will see the distinction between Deb Dana's teachings around polyvagal theory application in the therapy world versus the Genco method applications into the coaching world, because even there were a lot of exercises that therapist was directing, versus here we are going to collaborate and see what resonates with the client.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love how all of this is coming out of our conversation now.
Yes.
We're touching on a lot of really important aspects of this. Um, would it be okay if I try to offer a bit of a summary,
Yes, please.
and then we can see if there's anything remaining to touch on in polyvagal theory?
Yes, please.
Okay, so polyvagal theory will help us as coaches to understand more deeply how the nervous system is playing a role in coaching, and it will help us to be better listeners, more empathetic listeners. It will help us to understand the importance of calming the nervous system, both to help the client feel safe, but also in helping the client be ready for change.
Hmm.
And it will help to guide us in supporting the client in choice making and retraining their behavioral responses.
Beautiful. Thank you. I just want to add one more thing to that wonderful summary is that it's obviously our viewers gonna be likely to be coaches or therapists and in the field, but what often is missed in the coaching conversations that if one is not feeling safe, they cannot change. They can have some sort of overriding strategies, the band-aids around the behavior. That's when I say to my students often that if you're asking the client what they want out of the session, if they're telling you a strategy, a plan, or a list, you ask the question too soon. It's the same thing. If the person hasn't learned to be safe in the world, they cannot really create sustainable changes. Really, that's going to get to the core that they can figure out by understanding, deeply listening themselves. We will be just partnering them to help them listen themselves that, oh, okay, that's what my nervous system is telling me right now. And that generates this sort of response in my body. And so I like to change that response. So in a way, they can create their own safety measures so that they will get to their full potential.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for adding that, and how profound that is, what a difference that is for the client to find that place of safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good. So as I mentioned earlier, neuro-linguistic programming also helps to inform us about the client's nervous system. And you made some distinctions in that difference between polyvagal theory and neuro-linguistic programming. Would it be okay now if we shift our conversation to talking about NLP and that component of your course?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So one thing that I've learned as one of your students is that our use of language is really important as coaches because our language impacts the client's nervous system. And I'm understanding that some of this comes from NLP. So I'm wondering if we could discuss NLP and its relationship to coaching.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how would you like to go about talking about NLP in our conversation?
Would you like to give us again what you know? And then I'll fill in the gaps. Yeah.
This will be shorter because I know more about the polyvagal theory than I do about NLP, but I'm aware that it was developed in the 1970s
Mm-hmm.
and that it has applications in business and personal growth. It's used by therapists as well as coaches, and that it helps us to understand a possible connection between our neurological function, our language, and then also our behavior, which has been programmed by our social experiences early in life.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. So in NLP, what is understood is that our language reflects certain programming in our nervous system, how we relate to life. And this is why that Marianne, how much I emphasize cognitive distortions in my mentor sessions. Because if we don't understand and catch those as a coach, then we're really not relating to the client at that deeper level of
Mm-hmm.
where the distortion is occurring. Instead, we will be strategizing something else while that distortion remaining in the system. So our language that is reflective of how we view the world. For example, I was doing a mentor session last week, somebody mentioned, this is the story of my life, while they were talking about something repeatedly undesirable thing happening for them. So if their idea is that this is the story of their life, how likely do you think that's going to change? So we need to not to coach about whatever the last thing is that generated that theme, but what makes them think that is the story of their life. So therefore, that metaphoric speaking, the other identifications, the certain way of talking, are important in the NLP that came out of those researches. And some of us, again, kinesthetic, some of us are audio visual learners and so on, that it's going to come out of in our expression, the verbal expression. So in the executive coaching arena or the sales techniques and other places, people actually use these to manipulate us into buying things or goal setting and so on. Instead, we are going to really teach the coaches to empower the clients and coach them from that level of distortion so that they can actually recognize where the stems of the behavior so that they can actually choose. Again, the choice becomes available. So I'm wondering if you want to do another beautiful summary of yours.
Yeah, well, I was thinking for the listener that's maybe not familiar with the term cognitive distortion.
Yeah.
The distortion you were referring to in your example was the person was believing something is a theme in their life. Um, and we could expand upon that with an example like I'm not lovable is the story of my life.
Mhm.
That would definitely be an example of a cognitive distortion, and we can observe that in the person's language. And the way you apply NLP in coaching is different than in, say, a business or a political setting where people are advertising, where people are those cognitive distortions are being manipulated to achieve a goal. In coaching, we're talking about just awareness of those cognitive distortions. We can observe them in the client's language, and then we can help build awareness for the client and then invite them to make a new choice in their life with that awareness.
Beautiful. Yes. So that they, again, empower themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so here, NLP becomes a really powerful aspect of coaching. And you are correct. We talk about cognitive distortions all of the time in all of your learning offerings.
Mhm.
Um, NLP is something that you see talked about frequently in coaching circles. And I'm wondering, how is your use of NLP or your teaching about NLP different from other coaching courses in NLP?
Yeah. Is anything that what I see often that the trainings takes particular standardized approaches that being expressed through the language, like moving towards, moving away, when if the understanding client's response to the risk, for example, risk taking and so on. So often what you're going to see is that the training takes and gives you that sort of standardized templates to understand, and so then you can actually work with the client in a way hidden agenda to get them to a particular thing. What we are going to do is that really, I think viewers, it will be helpful for viewers to know that I also have bachelor's in electronics engineering, and I designed robots in first 5 years of my career. So really, we're going to look at the human system from the like a computer programming, so that we can really understand that how we take the input as a human being when we receive an input, and what is happening in our biology or physiology, and how is that translating into an outward expression as a behavior. So we're really going to, in that part of the course, we are going to be able to develop skills to hear the client's language, metaphoric language or reflective language, as a key to their model of the world. Understand then how to ask the inquiries from their around their model of the world, so they can use that as a self-discovery. And then from that point of view, we can work with the client to see what is their desired choice, that we can actually create new helpful programming for them instead of the ancient or unknowingly introduced viral programming into the human beings.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and going back to the experiential component that we discussed at the beginning of our discussion, this course is also an opportunity for us to understand our own nervous systems and our own internal maps and programming we might not be aware of.
absolutely. Absolutely. We often don't. And this is like the whatever, as you heard me saying, the cognitive distortions or these programmings are there running the show until you come into a traumatic experience that makes you stop and look, or you go into a transformative or transcendental coaching session to discover, right? Or do a deeply meditation. Otherwise, we are not aware that the good part of that unconscious or subconscious is that we learn something and then it gets in the autopilot. We don't have to think about it. But that's very same thing is the bad part of it too. Because if we learn something that is not necessarily supportive of our full potential, that's going to remain to be there. And we don't know that what gets in the way, and this is why that we see the same client coming to every session with the same kind of thing, unless we go into that depth to transform. Yeah.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that?
Right. Well, so bringing it back to that experiential aspect of learning, learning about polyvagal theory and NLP will help us as coaches to remove some of our own blind spots and also reach our greater potential as humans and as coaches.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. In Turkish, we say that if you're holding the jar of honey, you get to lick your fingers. So in my training, we need to first being transforming ourselves and then we can help others. That's my approach, really. I
Mhm.
wanted my students to experience first and understand, and then they can help others. Yeah.
That's lovely. So I'm envisioning at the end of this course as learners share their case studies and all of their learning, they'll all be able to walk away with that pot of honey with lots to lick off their fingers.
Yeah, I think that I might have even put it on some weight as I prepare the materials. I'm constantly looking through my nervous system. Oops, what's happening now?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, very good. Is there anything remaining that we haven't talked about today? We have talked about so many wonderful aspects of this course.
Um, I cannot think of anything else, but I think that one thing we didn't mention that there is how much time that you were asking me earlier about how much time that people needs to think about how flexible this is. There is a self-study part of it as we talked about it. So I'm assuming that people, besides the contact hours with me, it will be helpful for people to put aside about 4 or 5 hours each week to get to that experiential part of the course, that self practice, self reflection, homework, working with the client, and or more than a client, one client, it's their choice. um, that needs to be accounted as well. Yeah.
Hmm. And I can share as one of your students that when you can put aside that time, the learning does become a lot richer. There's a lot more opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that
Hmm.
share. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this course today.
Thank you so much for your beautiful contributions and summary and your knowledge. Marianne, if the viewers are wanting to learn more about you and your offerings, how will they find you?
They can find me online. They can find my website at mariannegernetzke.com or createhigherwellbeing.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And if you wanted to learn more about me, I guess I'm assuming you already found me on my website, but you can find more information about um, Genco method trainings, as well as which trainings are currently available under upcoming events section of the website. Talks about what's currently available, and Genco method trainings talk about what's available, may not be on the calendar just yet, so people can find it that way too. And thank you so much, Marianne. It's been such a joy and pleasure collaborating with you on this, and we want to thank everybody watching us.
Mhm. All right.